With a cardboard suitcase and her mother's words in mind, she leaves the village in search of a better future. When hired by a wealthy family, she uncovers dark secrets hidden behind the mansion's elegant facade. Amid lies, manipulation, and an unexpected friendship, she becomes the only one who can stop an impending tragedy. Mariana held in her memory the scent of damp earth from the small town where she was born. It was a tiny place, nestled in the heart of Kentucky, where everybody knew everybody, and the mornings began with the crowing of roosters and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Her mother, Celia, was a seamstress and laundress, a woman with calloused hands who woke before sunrise to ensure their daily bread. From childhood, Mariana learned that dignity wasn't measured by the size of a house or the amount of money in one's pocket. Dignity was in your character, in your given word, in honest work. At 18, with a cardboard suitcase tied with string and a heart full of dreams, Mariana left the town. The farewell was painful. Celia held her daughter's face with both hands, looked deep into her brown eyes, and said something Mariana would never forget. "My daughter, you're going far away, to a big city where no one knows you. But always remember, no matter where you are, you carry yourself with you. Always be honest, work with dedication, and never bow your head to anyone. We may be poor in money, but never in character." Mariana hugged her mother tightly, promised to write every week, and boarded the bus that would take her to New York City. During the long hours of the journey, she looked out the fogged-up window, watching the landscape change from the green of the mountains to the grey of the highways, from farms to factories. Every mile traveled was a step toward the unknown, but also toward a chance to build something better. New York City swallowed her like a mighty river swallows a small stone. The city was immense, noisy, frightening. For the first few days, Mariana stayed at the home of a distant cousin who lived in a neighborhood in Queens, a simple place where houses were packed tightly together and the sound of the train cut through the early morning. She got her first job through a neighbor, caring for an elderly woman in Brooklyn Heights. Then came other houses, other employers. Some treated her with respect, others ignored her as if she were part of the furniture. Mariana learned to be invisible when necessary and indispensable when called upon. The years passed both slowly and quickly. Mariana turned 28 working in other people's homes, cleaning furniture. That cost more than everything she owned in the world, preparing meals in kitchens larger than the house where she grew up. She sent money to her mother every month, without fail. She lived in a small back room in a boarding house in Park Slope, shared a bathroom with 4 other young women, and saved every penny she had left over. She had no boyfriend, no time for parties. Her dreams were simple: to save enough money to one day buy a small house back in her town, to ensure her mother had a peaceful old age. It was it. On a Tuesday in March, a hot and stuffy day typical of New York, that Mariana received the call that would change her life. It was Mrs. Peterson, one of her former employers, who had always treated her well and now worked as an intermediary for domestic jobs. Her voice sounded excited on the other end of the line. "Mariana, my dear, a very good opportunity has come up. A family on the Upper East Side needs someone trustworthy. It's to care for an elderly lady. She's ill, needs special care. The house is large, the salary is excellent, and they offer a room with a private bathroom. You have experience with the elderly, you're careful, responsible. I think this position is perfect for you." Mariana felt her heart race. The Upper East Side was one of New York's most exclusive neighborhoods, home to mansions, imported cars, people with important last names. She had never worked in a place like that. Would she be up to the task? Mrs. Peterson sensed her hesitation. "Mariana, you're good at what you do. You took care of my mother-in-law for 2 years and she adored you. Trust in your work. Do you want me to schedule an interview?" "Yes, please, Mrs. Peterson. Thank you very much." The interview was scheduled for the following Thursday. Mariana chose her best outfit, a pair of black pants and a white blouse she kept impeccably clean for special occasions. She tied her dark hair into a neat bun, applied a discreet pink lipstick, and said 3 Hail Marys before leaving. The address was on a tree-lined, quiet street, where each house looked like a small palace. The gate was made of ornate iron, imposing. Mariana rang the bell and a male voice answered through the intercom. She identified herself, the gate buzzed open, and she walked along the perfectly manicured garden to the front door. The house was a modern three-story building with large glass windows and a facade in shades of beige and white. It was beautiful, but there was something cold about it, as if life were missing from those perfect spaces. The door was opened by a man of about 40. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair showing a few grey strands at the temples. He wore a light blue dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up and tailored trousers. His eyes were a deep brown but carried a sadness that Mariana recognized immediately. It was the kind of sadness that comes from within, that changes the way a person sees the world. "You must be Mariana. Please, come in. My name is Edward." His voice was polite, but there was a formality that created distance. Mariana entered, wiped her feet on the doormat with excessive care, and followed Edward through a large living room with a high ceiling, designer furniture, and abstract paintings on the walls. Everything was beautiful, expensive, but there was a sense of emptiness that no object could fill. Edward led her to a smaller, cozier room with leather armchairs and a bookshelf filled with books. He gestured for her to sit and took the armchair opposite her. "Mariana, Mrs. Peterson spoke very highly of you. I need someone to take care of my mother. She has a serious illness and requires constant care. It's not an easy job. It demands patience, dedication, and above all, genuine affection. My mother is a strong person, but she's at a very difficult point in her life." Mariana listened attentively. There was something in the way Edward spoke of his mother that touched her heart. It wasn't just filial duty. It was true love mixed with pain. "I've taken care of several elderly people, Mr. Edward. I know it's delicate work, that it requires not only physical, but also emotional care. I like what I do. I like making a difference in people's lives." Edward observed her for a long moment, as if trying to read beyond her words. Then he nodded. "Good. I'll introduce you to my mother. She has the final say in the decision. If you two get along, the job is yours." They climbed a staircase with a marble handrail to the second floor. Edward stopped before a light wooden door and knocked gently before opening it. The room was spacious and bright, lit by a large window overlooking the garden. The bed was king-sized, with impeccable white sheets and several arranged pillows. In an armchair by the window, wrapped in a woolen shawl despite the heat, sat a woman Mariana guessed to be around 70. Mrs. Eleanor had white hair tied in a loose bun, her skin marked by the wrinkles that tell stories of decades lived. She was thin, visibly frail, but there was something proud in the way she held her posture erect, even while seated. Her blue eyes were lively and piercing, the kind of gaze that seems to see right through people. "Mother, this is Mariana. She's here for the interview." Mrs. Eleanor examined Mariana from head to toe with a look that wasn't hostile, merely assessing. Mariana held her gaze without looking away, not with arrogance, but with the dignity her mother had taught her. Something passed between the two women in that moment, a silent communication that needed no words. "Come closer, girl." Mariana walked to the armchair and stood beside the elderly woman. Mrs. Eleanor took her hand with a surprising strength for someone so fragile and examined the calloused palms, the ringless fingers, the short, clean nails. A worker's hands, honest hands. Her voice was hoarse but firm. "Where are you from?" "From the country, ma'am. A small town in Kentucky near Lexington." "And your family?" "It's just me and my mother. She's a seamstress, raised me by herself, with much sacrifice and much love." Mrs. Eleanor released Mariana's hand and leaned back in her armchair, her eyes still fixed on her. "Do you know why I chose you before you even opened your mouth? Because I recognize in your eyes the same thing I saw in my mother's eyes: strength, integrity, the ability to endure what life throws at you without losing your essence. I need someone like that by my side now. I don't need pity. I need someone who will treat me like a person, not a task to be completed." Mariana felt her eyes sting. How long had it been since someone had spoken to her that way, as if she were more than just a pair of hands for work? "I promise to take Care of you with all the respect and affection you deserve. Then you're hired. Edward, arrange whatever is necessary." Edward seemed relieved. They discussed salary, hours, and conditions. Mariana would start the following week and would have the back room on the second floor with its own bathroom and a small balcony. It was more than she could have ever dreamed of. The first few days were about adjusting. Mariana woke up early, prepared breakfast according to the instructions left by Edward, went upstairs to help Mrs. Eleanor with her morning hygiene, changing clothes and medication. The elderly woman was demanding but not rude. She had high standards, but was also grateful when things were done well. A comfortable routine began to form between them. It was during the afternoons that they truly talked. While Mariana helped Mrs. Eleanor walk in the garden or sit on the porch, the elderly woman would tell stories of her life. She had been a literature professor, married young to a successful businessman, and raised Edward with a firm hand and an open heart. She had been widowed for 15 years and had since dedicated herself to charity work and reading. She was a cultured woman with strong opinions and a remarkable personality. Mariana, in turn, spoke of her town, her mother, her simple dreams of having a small piece of land where she could grow tomatoes and raise chickens. Mrs. Eleanor listened with genuine interest, never showing pity or condescension. She treated Mariana as an equal, something rare in the houses where she had worked. "You know, Mariana," Mrs. Eleanor said one of those afternoons, as they had tea on the porch, "true wealth isn't in the size of the house. I've lived in this mansion for 30 years, and there are days when it feels like the loneliest place in the world. You, who come from so little, carry within you something that many rich people will never have. Contentment. You know who you are, and that's worth more than any bank account." It was during one of those first weeks that Mariana met Vanessa. It was a Saturday afternoon when a woman walked through the front door as if she owned the place. She must have been in her early 30s, with a slender body maintained by expensive gyms, perfectly styled blonde hair, impeccable red nails, and designer clothes that Mariana recognized from the windows on Madison Avenue. She was beautiful, no doubt, but there was something calculated about all that beauty, as if every detail were part of a carefully crafted strategy. "Hi, darling." Her voice was melodious but artificial. She kissed Edward quickly, and then noticed Mariana in the living room, organizing some books on the shelf. The look Vanessa cast in her direction was one of pure coldness, the kind of look that reduces a person to nothing. "You must be the new help." The way she said help was laced with disdain. Mariana just nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am, I'm Mariana. I take care of Mrs. Eleanor." "Good. I hope you're more efficient than the last one. Edward, shall we? I have a reservation at the restaurant." Edward seemed uncomfortable with how Vanessa had treated Mariana, but he said nothing. He just grabbed the car keys and left with her. Mariana stood in the living room for a moment, feeling a strange sensation in her chest. It wasn't hurt. It was intuition. That woman was not who she pretended to be. In the following days, Vanessa began to appear more frequently, always impeccable, always full of smiles for Edward and cold glances for everyone else. Mariana noticed that she never went upstairs to visit Mrs. Eleanor, never asked how the elderly woman was doing. When she had to pass through the hallway leading to her potential mother-in-law's room, she did so quickly as if the illness were contagious. Mrs. Eleanor, for her part, did not hide her dislike. "That woman is no good, Mariana. Mark my words. She doesn't love my son. She loves his bank account, his last name, his status. I've seen many women like her in my life. I know how to recognize when someone is wearing a mask. Do you think you should talk to him? I've tried. He's blind. He lost Beatrice 2 years ago and still hasn't recovered. That woman took advantage of his vulnerability, slithered into his life like a snake into a bird's nest. But he won't listen to me. He thinks I'm just a bitter, prejudiced old woman." Mariana noticed the pain in Mrs. Eleanor's eyes whenever Edward entered the room accompanied by Vanessa. She saw how the elderly woman tensed up, how her hands trembled slightly, and she also saw how Vanessa masterfully manipulated Edward, always touching his arm at the right moment, always saying exactly what he needed to hear, always reinforcing the narrative that Mrs. Eleanor was possessive and didn't want to see him happy. One day, Mariana was preparing lunch in the kitchen when Vanessa walked in. The house was empty. Edward had left for a meeting. Vanessa opened the refrigerator, took out a bottle of water, and then turned to Mariana with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You seem like an intelligent girl, Mariana, so I'll be direct with you. This house will soon be mine. Edward and I are getting married. When that happens, some changes will be necessary. I plan to hire a staff that's more suited to our lifestyle. So I suggest you start looking for another job. Nothing personal, you understand? Just a matter of efficiency." Mariana gripped the wooden spoon in her hand, counting to 10 mentally as her mother had taught her to do when anger flared. "With all due respect, Miss Vanessa, Mr. Edward hired me. As long as he needs me here, I'll stay. Especially as long as Mrs. Eleanor needs me." Vanessa narrowed her eyes. "Mrs. Eleanor." She pronounced the name with scorn. "That woman won't last much longer. And when she's gone, there will be no reason for you to be here. Think about what I said." And she walked out of the kitchen, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and poison in the air. That night, Mariana went up to Mrs. Eleanor's room with the dinner tray and found the elderly woman looking out the window, lost in thought. Hearing her enter, Mrs. Eleanor turned. "She spoke to you today, didn't she?" Mariana placed the tray on the table and nodded. "How did you know?" "Because I know her type. She's marking her territory, showing her claws. She knows you're loyal to me, and that bothers her. People like Vanessa don't like witnesses. They need to eliminate anyone who can see the truth behind the facade." "Do you really think she's dangerous?" Mrs. Eleanor took Mariana's hand. "I know she is, and I also know my time is running out, Mariana. I have no illusions about that. But before I go, I need to be sure my son will be protected. He's all I have. I can't leave him in the hands of a swindler." "What do you want me to do?" "Stay alert. Watch everything. That woman will slip up at some point. They always do. And when that happens, we need to have proof. Are you willing to help me?" Mariana looked at this woman, physically frail but strong in spirit, who in a few short weeks had become more than an employer. She thought of her own mother, of the values she was taught about protecting those in need, about doing what is right, even when it's hard. "Yes, Mrs. Eleanor, you can count on me." The two women sealed a silent pact, an agreement of loyalty and protection that would go beyond the bounds of employer and employee. It was an alliance between two warriors, each fighting in her own way against what they knew to be a real threat. And Mariana, who had come from so far away, carrying only a cardboard suitcase and her mother's teachings about dignity, had no idea how much that decision would forever change the course of her life. The pact was sealed. The battle was about to begin. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing, the following weeks brought a routine that bordered on ritual. Mariana would wake at sunrise, prepare fresh coffee, and go up with the tray to Mrs. Eleanor's room. The elderly woman was always awake, looking out the window or reading a book of poetry. Between them, the bond deepened with every conversation, every shared silence, every quiet laugh over some sharp observation Mrs. Eleanor made about life. Edward worked long hours at his office downtown. He was in the import-export business, a company his father had built and which he maintained with almost obsessive dedication. Mariana sensed that work was also a form of escape, a way to avoid facing the pain he carried. He was polite to her, always thanking her for caring for his mother, but he maintained a respectful distance. They were rarely in the same room for more than a few minutes. Vanessa, on the other hand, made her presence increasingly felt. She would show up for lunch, for dinner, and spend entire weekends at the mansion. She treated the place as if it were already hers, rearranging flowers in vases, suggesting changes to the decor, talking about future renovations. And Edward, thirsty for companionship and affection after 2 years of loneliness, seemed not to notice how much this woman was taking over every space in his life. It was on a Thursday afternoon that Mariana witnessed a scene that confirmed all her suspicions. She was in the second-floor hallway, taking clean towels to the linen closet, when she heard voices coming from the guest room where Vanessa kept some of her clothes. The door was ajar, and Mariana, with no intention of eavesdropping, ended up overhearing the phone conversation. "Relax, everything's under control." Vanessa's voice was completely different from the sugary melody she used with Edward. It was cold, calculating. "The old woman won't last much longer anyway. The doctor said it's a matter of months. And when that happens, I'll be so embedded in his life that it'll be natural to take the next step. Yes, marriage, obviously, and full access to the accounts. You know the script, we've done this before." Mariana felt the blood run cold in her veins. She stood frozen in the hallway, the towels clutched to her chest, her heart beating so loudly she thought everyone in the house could hear it. No, there won't be a problem. He's completely in love. Or rather, he's in love with the idea of not being alone anymore. I just fill the void. And that little maid who takes care of his mother. Insignificant. I'll get rid of her as soon as I can. She watches too much, notices too much. People like her are dangerous because they have nothing to lose. Vanessa laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. "In 6 months, a year at most, I'll walk out of here with a good chunk of his money. Then we'll meet up in Miami and plan the next one." Yes, I have. To go, he'll be here soon. Kisses." Mariana slipped back into the service hallway before Vanessa left the room. She hurried up the stairs to Mrs. Eleanor's room, went inside, and closed the door, leaning against it with trembling legs. "Mariana, what happened? You're pale." Mrs. Eleanor was sitting in her armchair, a shawl over her shoulders despite the April warmth. Mariana approached, knelt beside the chair, and recounted, word for word, what she had heard. As she spoke, she saw Mrs. Eleanor's expression harden, her blue eyes shining with a mixture of anger and determination. "I knew it. My God, I knew she was no good, but this is worse than I imagined. She's not just a common gold digger, she's a criminal. She has an accomplice. She's probably done this to other men. Mariana, my son is in real danger. We have to tell him." "And you think he'll believe us?" "Mariana, my son is blind with loneliness. He'll think it's jealousy, that it's the paranoia of a possessive mother. He'll think you're lying to please me. No, we need proof, concrete proof that he can't deny." "How?" Mrs. Eleanor picked up her cell phone from the small table beside her armchair and quickly typed something. "I'm going to hire a private investigator. A good one. Someone who can investigate this woman's past, find out who she really is. But that will take time. In the meantime, you need to stay alert. Watch everything. Write down anything strange." Mariana agreed, still feeling the impact of what she had heard. At dinner that night, she could barely look at Vanessa without feeling revulsion. The woman was particularly cheerful, telling Edward about a spa she had visited, gesturing gracefully with her hands where a diamond ring he had given her sparkled. In the following days, Mariana became a silent observer. She noticed that Vanessa rummaged through papers in the office when Edward wasn't there. She saw her photograph documents with her phone. She realized that she always found excuses to dismiss Mariana from tasks that kept her nearby, preferring to be alone in certain rooms of the house. The private investigator, a discreet, middle-aged man named Anthony, made his first visit disguised as a telephone technician. He spoke briefly with Mrs. Eleanor, while Mariana stood guard, and left with a list of information. Vanessa's full name, documents she had provided to Edward, photos, a detailed physical description. "I'll start with the databases. Fake ID, criminal records, records in other states. If this woman has a criminal past, I'll find it. But I need time, maybe a few weeks." A few weeks. Mrs. Eleanor nodded, but Mariana saw the worry in the elderly woman's eyes. Time was a luxury she might not have. The disease was progressing silently, stealing her energy, appetite, the color from her skin. There were days when Mrs. Eleanor could barely get out of bed, days when the pain was so intense she needed larger doses of medication to endure it. And then, one evening in May, what Mrs. Eleanor feared most happened. It was a Sunday. Edward had prepared a special dinner, hiring a private chef to cook at the house. Vanessa arrived radiant, wearing a turquoise dress that enhanced her eyes. During dinner, she held Edward's hand across the table, looked deep into his eyes, and made the announcement. "Darling, I have some news. Wonderful news." She paused dramatically, savoring the moment. "I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." The silence that followed was absolute. Edward froze, his fork in mid-air, his eyes wide. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, a genuine smile that Mariana hadn't seen since she arrived at that house. "Vanessa, are you sure? Did you take a test?" "I took 3 tests, all positive, and I've already scheduled an appointment with the obstetrician for next week. Edward, you're going to be a father." Edward stood up from his chair so quickly it nearly toppled over, went around the table and hugged Vanessa, lifting her off the floor. There were tears in his eyes, tears of joy, of relief, of hope. He was about to have a second chance, a family again. Mariana, who was serving wine at the other end of the room, felt her stomach turn. She looked at Vanessa over Edward's shoulder and saw, for a split second, the mask slip. The woman's smile was triumphant, predatory. Then Edward pulled away and the mask was back in place, all tenderness and emotion. "I have to tell my mother." "Darling, wait." Vanessa held his arm. "Let's wait until after the first appointment, okay? Just to be sure everything is fine. You know the first trimester is delicate." "Of course, you're right, we'll wait." But Edward could barely contain his excitement. "I'm going to be a father, Vanessa. I'm going to be a father." That night, after Vanessa had left and Edward had shut himself in his room, Mariana went up to talk to Mrs. Eleanor. She found the elderly woman awake, sitting up in bed, her hands clasped in her lap. "She said she's pregnant." It wasn't a question. Mrs. Eleanor had heard everything from her room. She did. "And do you believe her?" Mariana shook her head slowly. "No, I think it's a lie, another part of her plan." Mrs. Eleanor closed her eyes for a long moment. "This changes everything, Mariana. If my son believes he's going to have a baby, he'll rush the relationship with her. He'll probably propose in a matter of weeks. We need to act fast, very fast." "What do we do?" "Tomorrow, you call Anthony. Tell him it's urgent. I need results, even if they're partial. And you need to find out if this pregnancy is real. I don't know how, but you have to." Mariana lay awake all night, thinking. How could she find out if a pregnancy was real or fake? She wasn't a doctor. She had no access to Vanessa's tests. She couldn't just accuse her without proof. But there had to be a way. The answer came from an unexpected place. The next morning, while tidying the guest room Vanessa used, Mariana found something strange in the bathroom trash can. Wrapped in toilet paper were 3 pregnancy tests. She carefully removed and examined them. They all showed a positive result. So the pregnancy was real. But something didn't add up. Mariana looked more closely and noticed that the tests looked stained, as if something had been applied to them. She wrapped the tests in a plastic bag and hid them in the back of a drawer. Maybe a lab could analyze them. Over the next few days, Mariana watched Vanessa like a hawk watches its prey. And that's when she began to notice small inconsistencies. Vanessa claimed to have morning sickness, but Mariana saw her eating peacefully in the kitchen when she thought she was alone. She complained of breast tenderness, but didn't hesitate to wear tight, low-cut clothes. She said she was tired, but had plenty of energy to go out with friends. And then one afternoon when Edward was away on a business trip, Mariana saw something that confirmed her suspicions. She was passing through the hallway when she noticed the guest room bathroom door was ajar. On impulse, she glanced inside and saw Vanessa in front of the mirror, her shirt lifted, holding something against her stomach. Mariana approached silently and saw they were syringes, small syringes with a clear liquid. Vanessa injected the contents of one syringe into herself, in the abdominal area, and then put everything away in a toiletry bag. Mariana quickly moved away before she could be seen, her heart racing. What was that? Why was Vanessa injecting herself with something? She needed that toiletry bag. She needed to find out what was in those syringes. But how could she get it without Vanessa noticing? The opportunity arose 3 days later. Vanessa scheduled a trip to the beauty salon that would last all afternoon. As soon as she left, Mariana went up to the room and looked for the toiletry bag. She found it hidden inside a suitcase in the closet. Inside were 10 small syringes, all with labels written in English. Mariana photographed everything with her phone and wrote down the names of the medications. That evening, she showed the photos to Mrs. Eleanor. Human chorionic gonadotropin, Mrs. Eleanor read, adjusting her glasses. HCG. Mariana, this is the hormone that pregnancy tests detect. If she's injecting this into herself, she's manipulating the hormone levels in her body to make the tests come out positive. The pregnancy is fake. The two women looked at each other, the weight of that revelation hanging in the air between them. Why would she do that? Because a baby speeds everything up. Marriage, access to bank accounts, inheritance. Edward would give anything for a child. And after she gets what she wants, she'll claim a miscarriage and walk away with her share. It's the perfect scam. We have to tell him. And how do we explain that you were snooping through her things? Mariana, she could turn this against us, say we're making things up, that you stole the syringes to frame her. No, we need more. We need Anthony's report. We need her to incriminate herself in her own words. Mariana understood what Mrs. Eleanor was suggesting. You want me to record her? If you can, yes. A clear confession. Irrefutable proof. It was risky. If Vanessa found out, she could take drastic measures. But what else could they do? Edward was completely enchanted. He was already talking about buying a crib, renovating a room for the baby, getting married before the baby bump started to show. Mariana waited for the right opportunity. It came on a Friday afternoon. Vanessa was in the office talking on the phone. The door was closed, but Mariana knew there was a gap underneath, large enough to place a phone in audio recording mode. With trembling hands, she placed the device as close to the door as possible, activated the recording and moved away, pretending to clean the paintings in the hallway. Vanessa was speaking loudly, cheerfully. Honey, it's all working out. He's completely convinced. He's already started talking about marriage. Yes, I know it's fast, but we have to take advantage while his mother is still alive. After she dies, it'll be more complicated, because he'll go into mourning again. No, I'm not really pregnant, you silly goose. It's the HCG trick, just like the other times. It works perfectly. I'll be pregnant for a few months, we get married, I get access to the accounts, and then I'll fake a miscarriage. Tragic, painful. He'll be devastated, and I'll be there to comfort him, and as a bonus I'll walk away with a nice pile of cash when I decide the marriage isn't working out. She laughed, that sharp laugh Mariana hated. The maid! Please, she's invisible. Nobody listens to the maid. And if she opens her mouth, I'll turn the tables, say she's trying to sabotage me because she's interested in the boss. Who do you think he'll believe? His pregnant girlfriend or the uneducated little maid? As for the old woman, she'll die soon anyway. The doctors gave her 6 months at most. After that, it's clear sailing. Vanessa continued talking for a few more minutes, detailing plans on how to access the bank accounts, what amounts she intended to transfer, where she would flee afterward. It was a complete, detailed, irrefutable confession. When she hung up, Mariana quickly grabbed her phone and ran up to Mrs. Eleanor's room. Her hands were shaking so much she almost dropped the device. She connected it to a small speaker and played the recording. Mrs. Eleanor listened in absolute silence, her face growing paler, her eyes welling with tears of anger and pain. When the recording ended, she covered her face with her hands and let the tears flow freely. My son, my poor son. He doesn't deserve this. He's already lost so much, and now this viper wants to destroy him completely. What do we do now? Mrs. Eleanor wiped her tears, and her face took on an expression of iron-willed determination. Now we wait. Anthony should bring the report in a few days. We'll gather all the evidence, the recording, the photos of the syringes, the detective's report, and then we'll present it all to Edward at once. But Mariana, we have to be careful. Vanessa can't know we're investigating. If she feels cornered, I don't know what she's capable of. Those words would prove prophetic in a terrible way, because Vanessa, even without consciously knowing she was being investigated, sensed that something was wrong. And desperate, dangerous people in vulnerable positions do terrible things. The following days were filled with an almost unbearable tension. Mariana felt as if she were walking on broken glass. each step potentially the one that would cause the final disaster. Vanessa moved through the house with the arrogance of someone who already considered herself the owner of everything, making plans for the baby's room renovation, choosing names, faking morning sickness in front of Edward while devouring sandwiches when she thought she was alone. Edward, for his part, was radiant. Mariana saw a transformation in him that was almost painful to witness. The man who had walked the halls like a ghost since she arrived now smiled, whistled while he worked, spoke excitedly on the phone about future outings with his child. It was like watching someone be resurrected, only to know that the resurrection was built on lies. Mrs. Eleanor grew weaker each day. The pain intensified, and with it came a deep fatigue, the kind that steals the will to get out of bed, to eat, to go on. But she clung to life with fierce determination, driven by the need to protect her son before she passed. Mariana spent her nights in the room next to hers, waking at every sound, checking the elderly woman's breathing, administering medication. It was on one of those mornings, as May was turning to June and the chill was beginning to set in New York, that Anthony, the private investigator, finally brought the report. He arrived discreetly through the back entrance, dressed as a deliveryman carrying a thick envelope. Mariana led him to Mrs. Eleanor's room, where she was propped up in bed with several pillows behind her back. The elderly woman's eyes lit up when she saw the envelope. "I brought what you asked for, Mrs. Eleanor, and it's worse than we imagined." Anthony opened the envelope and spread documents over the bedspread. There were photos, copies of police reports, newspaper clippings, official documents. Her real name is Valerie Smith Miller. Vanessa Costa is the fourth fake identity she's used. She's 36, not 32, as she told Edward. She has a history of fraud that began 15 years ago. The pattern is always the same. She approaches recently widowed or divorced men, preferably older and with considerable assets. She wins their trust, announces a fake pregnancy, marries quickly, and then starts siphoning money. When she feels she's about to be discovered, she fakes a miscarriage, uses the tragedy to gain more sympathy and time, and when she finally manages to transfer significant amounts, she asks for a divorce or simply disappears. Mrs. Eleanor listened in absolute silence, her hands trembling slightly as she held the documents. There's more. She has a sister who is her accomplice. That's who she talks to on the phone. The two of them are a team. They've scammed at least 5 men in the last 10 years. Here, he pointed to a stack of documents, are records of 3 criminal cases filed against her in different states, one in Florida, another in Texas, and the most recent one in California. In the last case, she fled before she could be arrested. There's an outstanding warrant for her arrest. Mariana felt nauseous seeing it all. It wasn't just greed or opportunism, it was an elaborate criminal scheme, a lifetime dedicated to deceiving and destroying people. And there's one more thing. Anthony pulled out a photo. It was of an elegant man in his 50s with glasses. This is Richard Myers, a businessman from Chicago. He was her last victim before Edward. The man had a nervous breakdown when he discovered he'd been scammed. He lost not only his money but his trust in people. He's been in psychiatric treatment ever since. Mrs. Eleanor closed her eyes tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I will not let her do this to my son. I will not. With this evidence and the recording you have, we can go straight to the police. The arrest warrant already exists. It's just a matter of locating and arresting her." "But first," Mrs. Eleanor said in a firm voice, "first my son needs to see this. He needs to understand who he's dealing with. If the police arrest her before that, he might never fully believe it. He might think it was persecution, that the evidence was fabricated. No, he needs to see, to hear, to understand. Only then can we act." Anthony agreed and left, leaving the envelope with all the material. Mrs. Eleanor and Mariana were left alone, surrounded by those documents that told a story of horror and manipulation. When do we tell Edward? Soon. But we need to choose the right moment. He's very emotional right now, very vulnerable. If we just dump this on him, it could have the opposite effect. The right moment, however, never came, because that very afternoon, something terrible happened. Mrs. Eleanor had asked for some tea. She felt very cold, her bones ached, and she wanted something warm to heat her from the inside. Mariana was preparing the tea in the kitchen when Vanessa entered. "Let me take it to her." Mariana hesitated. Something in Vanessa's tone, in the way her eyes avoided direct contact, set off all the alarms in her mind. "That's okay. I'm about to go up anyway." "I insist." Vanessa took the cup from Mariana's hands with a swift movement. "After all, she'll soon be my mother-in-law. I need to start building some kind of relationship with her, don't I?" Before Mariana could protest, Vanessa was already climbing the stairs. Mariana stood frozen in the kitchen, her heart tight with a bad feeling. She waited a few minutes and then went up too, silently. When she reached the second-floor hallway, she heard voices coming from Mrs. Eleanor's room. She moved closer and stood by the door, which was slightly ajar. "Why should I drink something you're offering me?" Mrs. Eleanor's voice was weak, but had a defiant edge. "Because it's just tea, Mrs. Eleanor. Or are you afraid of me?" "I am, and for good reason." There was a pause. Then Vanessa laughed, that cold laugh Mariana knew so well. "You're smart, too smart for your own good. But it doesn't matter. Even if you don't drink the tea, even if you live a few more months, it won't change anything. Edward is already mine, and when I become his wife, this house will be mine. And then, dear mother-in-law, I'll make sure your last days are very uncomfortable. My son will not marry you." "Oh, he will, because I'm carrying his child, or at least that's what he believes. And when the time is right, I'll lose this fake baby and win his eternal sympathy. You know how it is, a widower and a mother who lost a child united by pain. It's poetic." "You're a monster." "No, Mrs. Eleanor, I'm a survivor, and survivors do what needs to be done." Mariana heard footsteps approaching the door and barely had time to hide behind a curtain before Vanessa came out of the room. The woman passed by without noticing her, went down the stairs and left the house. Mariana ran into the room. Mrs. Eleanor was pale, trembling, the teacup untouched on the small table. "Mariana, she's worse than we thought. Much worse. What she said about my last days being uncomfortable, that wasn't just an empty threat. That woman is capable of anything." "You didn't drink the tea?" "I didn't. Something told me not to. I'm tired of living in fear, Mariana. Enough. Tomorrow, we're telling Edward everything. With or without proof, he needs to know." Mariana carefully picked up the teacup. "I'll keep this. Maybe there's something in it. If there is, it's more proof." She wrapped the cup in a cloth and hid it in the back of her closet. The next morning, she would take it to a lab to have the contents analyzed. But before she could, the worst happened. It was early evening when Edward arrived home, bringing Vanessa with him. They had gone shopping for baby things. Edward was excited, showing Mariana the little clothes, the tiny shoes. Mariana smiled forcedly, her heart breaking to see how he was being deceived. Mrs. Eleanor came down for dinner that night, a rare occurrence. She wanted to talk to her son, to find an opening in the conversation to bring up the truth, but Vanessa monopolized all of Edward's attention, touching his arm, laughing at his jokes, talking about plans for the baby's room. It was when Edward got up to get more wine from the cellar that Mrs. Eleanor saw her chance. "Vanessa, we need to talk." "About what, mother-in-law?" Vanessa's tone was falsely sweet. "About who you really are, about the lies you're telling my son." Vanessa became very still. When she spoke, her voice was dangerously low. "Be careful what you say, Mrs. Eleanor. Accusations without proof can be very dangerous. I have proof, plenty of proof, and tomorrow I'm showing everything to Edward." Something changed in Vanessa's eyes. It was like watching a mask completely dissolve, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "You're not going to tell him anything?" "Yes, I am." "And you're going to be arrested. There's a warrant out for you." Vanessa shot up from the table so abruptly that her chair almost fell. Mrs. Eleanor also stood, leaning on the back of her chair, her legs trembling from the effort. The two women faced each other, one old and sick but unyielding, the other young and strong but cornered. "I won't let you destroy my son," Mrs. Eleanor said in a firm voice, "and I won't let you destroy my plans. I've worked too hard to get here. That's when Vanessa lunged forward, not to attack directly but to intimidate, pushing Mrs. Eleanor with her body. The elderly woman, frail and off balance, stumbled backward. She was at the top of the stairs. Mariana, coming from the kitchen with dessert, saw it all in slow motion. She saw Vanessa push, saw Mrs. Eleanor lose her balance, saw the elderly woman's body tumble backward and fall down the flight of stairs in a horrible, disjointed motion. Mariana's scream echoed through the house. The tray of desserts fell to the floor, the plates shattering. Edward came running from the cellar, his eyes wide with horror as he saw his mother lying on the marble floor at the foot of the stairs, motionless. "Mom, Mom!" He knelt beside her, his hands shaking, not knowing whether to touch her or not. Mariana ran to them, checked Mrs. Eleanor's pulse with trembling fingers. It was weak, but it was there. "She's alive! Call an ambulance, quick!" Vanessa was standing at the top of the stairs, pale, her eyes wide. Edward looked up at her. "What happened? How did she fall?" "I don't know, darling. She was arguing with me, saying nonsensical things. I think she got confused because of her medication. She lost her balance and—" "Liar!" Mariana's voice came out in a shout. "She pushed her, I saw it. Vanessa pushed Mrs. Eleanor down the stairs." "What? You're insane!" Vanessa came down the steps quickly. "Edward, she's making this up, out of jealousy, because she knows that when we get married I'll fire her. She's trying to frame me." Edward looked from one to the other, completely lost. The ambulance arrived in 15 minutes that felt like 15 hours. The paramedics carefully immobilized Mrs. Eleanor and took her away. Edward went with her in the ambulance, leaving Mariana and Vanessa alone in the house. The two women stared at each other in the hallway. Vanessa had already recomposed her mask, but there was something wild in her eyes. "You just signed your termination papers, Mariana. And you just signed your prison sentence." Mariana went up to her room, grabbed the envelope with all the evidence Anthony had brought, and put it in her purse. She also took her phone with the recording and the wrapped teacup. She was going to the hospital. Edward needed to see all of this. Now. At the hospital, Mrs. Eleanor was in the ICU. She had 3 fractured ribs, a head injury and a fractured hip. The doctors were cautious in their prognosis. Given her overall health, a full recovery would be difficult. But she was alive. She was fighting. Edward was sitting in the waiting room, his face in his hands. Mariana approached him, her purse clutched to her chest. "Mr. Edward, I need to talk to you. It's urgent." "Mariana, not now. My mother is between life and death. I can't—" "That's exactly why it has to be now. Please, just give me 10 minutes. Something in her tone made Edward look up. Mariana had never spoken to him that way before, with such urgency, such determination. "All right, what is it?" Mariana opened her purse and began to take out the documents one by one. Edward took them, read them, his face growing paler and more incredulous with each one. "What is this? Where did you get this?" "Mrs. Eleanor hired a private investigator a few weeks ago. She suspected Vanessa, and she was right. This woman is not who she says she is. Her real name is Valerie. She has a history of fraud. She's done this to other men. The pregnancy is fake, Mr. Edward. She's using hormone injections to fake the tests." "This is absurd. Vanessa wouldn't do that. She loves me." "She doesn't. She loves your money." Mariana took out her phone and played the recording. Vanessa's voice echoed through the empty waiting room, each word a blow to Edward's heart. Mariana saw the moment he understood, when reality finally broke through the illusion. She saw his face crumble, his eyes fill with tears, his hands begin to shake. When the recording ended, Edward was silent for several long minutes. Then, in a broken voice, he said, "My mother knew. She tried to warn me, and I didn't listen. I thought it was jealousy that she didn't want to see me happy, and now she's in there dying because she tried to protect me from a lie I was too eager to believe. It wasn't your fault, Mr. Edward. This woman is a professional. She knows exactly how to manipulate, how to create the perfect illusion." Edward wiped his eyes and stood up. When he spoke, his voice had a new firmness, cold as ice. "Where are the other documents? The full report from the investigator? Here, everything. Is there an arrest warrant for her? Yes, issued in California 6 months ago. Edward took out his phone and made a call. Hello, I need to speak to a detective. It's urgent. I have information on the whereabouts of a wanted fugitive. While Edward spoke with the police, Mariana went up to see Mrs. Eleanor. The elderly woman was sedated, connected to several machines, her face pale against the white sheets. But even unconscious, there was a peace in her expression, as if she knew she had accomplished her mission, that she had protected her son in time. Mariana took Mrs. Eleanor's fragile hand and whispered, "We did it, Mrs. Eleanor. He knows the truth. She won't hurt him anymore. You can rest now." And there, in that hospital room smelling of antiseptic and the steady beep of monitors, Mariana cried. She cried for this strong woman who had become more than an employer, more than a friend. She had become family. And you protect family until the end. Vanessa's arrest happened that same night. When she arrived at the mansion on the Upper East Side, she found 3 police cars parked in front of the gate. Edward was there, standing at the entrance, the documents and the recording already in the hands of the authorities. His face was a mask of contained pain and anger. Vanessa tried to run when she saw the police cars, but she didn't get far. She was apprehended in the garden, handcuffed, her screams of protest echoing down the silent street. She denied everything at first, but when the detective presented the arrest warrant from California and the full investigator's report, something in her broke. The mask finally fell for good. "You're nothing but a fool, Edward," she spat the words as she was put in the police car. "A lonely, desperate fool. It was too easy. You handed me everything on a silver platter." Edward didn't reply. He just stood there watching the woman he thought he loved being taken away, handcuffed, shouting obscenities. When the police cars finally left, he sat on the steps of the house and cried. He cried for the lost illusion, for the naivety that had almost cost him everything, for the mother who was in a hospital bed for trying to protect him. Mariana, who had stayed at the hospital, received the news of the arrest by text message. She felt a deep relief, but also an immense sadness. No victory would be complete as long as Mrs. Eleanor was in that bed, fighting to survive. The following days were agonizing. Mrs. Eleanor underwent surgery to repair her fractured hip, a delicate procedure given her overall health. The doctors were honest. The chances of a full recovery were low. But Mrs. Eleanor was a fighter. She always had been. A week after the surgery, she woke up. Edward was by her bedside, holding her hand. The elderly woman's blue eyes opened slowly, confused at first, then focusing on her son's face. "Edward." "I'm here, Mom. I'm here." "Vanessa." "She's been arrested. You were right about everything." "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you." Mrs. Eleanor squeezed her son's hand with surprising strength. "It's not your fault, my son. That woman was good at what she did. But the important thing is that you're safe now. Thanks to you, you saved me, even though it almost cost you your life. A son is worth any price." Mariana entered the room with fresh flowers. When Mrs. Eleanor saw her, her face lit up. "My girl, my warrior." Mariana approached the bed, tears streaming freely down her face. "You gave us a terrible scare. I'm tough. I'm not going to die that easily." But they knew the truth. The doctors had been clear. Mrs. Eleanor's body was too tired, too weak. The fall had made everything worse. It was a matter of time. Mrs. Eleanor was discharged from the hospital 3 weeks later and returned home. Edward hired professional nurses to help Mariana with her care, but it was Mariana whom the elderly woman wanted near. It was with her that Mrs. Eleanor talked on long afternoons, reminiscing about her life, giving advice, talking about the books she loved, the poetry that gave her comfort. "You know, Mariana," she said one of those July afternoons as the rain beat against the windows, "I'm not afraid to go. I've lived a good life. I loved deeply. I raised a wonderful son. What gives me peace is knowing that Edward is safe, that he has you looking out for him. Mrs. Eleanor, don't talk like that. You're going to be with us for a long time yet. We both know that's not true, and that's okay. I just want you to promise me one thing, anything. Promise me you'll take care of my son, not as an employee but as family. He's going to need someone in the difficult months to come. And you are strong, stronger than you know. Promise me?" "I promise, Mrs. Eleanor, I promise." Edward changed a lot after Vanessa's arrest. The mask of the successful executive he wore fell away, revealing a wounded man willing to heal. He began to work from home whenever possible, wanting to be near his mother. He talked with her for long periods, asking for advice about business, about life, about how to move on after being so deeply deceived. And in the long conversations they had on the porch, while Mrs. Eleanor rested, Edward began to see Mariana with new eyes, not as the invisible employee who performed tasks, but as the strong, principled woman who had risked everything to protect his family. He saw how she cared for his mother with genuine tenderness, how she possessed a simple but profound wisdom, how her smile lit up even the darkest days. "Mariana," he said one of those afternoons, "I never properly thanked you. You saved my life. If it weren't for you and my mother, I would have married that woman, lost everything. How can I ever thank you?" "You don't need to thank me, Mr. Edward. I did what any decent person would do." "No, few people would have had the courage to do what you did. Few people would have risked their job, their security to do what's right. You're rare, Mariana, special." She felt her face flush at the compliment, but said nothing. She just smiled and went back inside with the tea tray. The months passed. Mrs. Eleanor had good days and bad days. On good days, she would come down to the living room, sit in her favorite armchair and read poetry aloud to Edward and Mariana. On bad days, she stayed in bed, the pain stealing her strength, but never her dignity. It was on a day in October, when spring was beginning to awaken New York with its flowers and warmth, that Mrs. Eleanor asked to speak with Mariana privately. Edward left the room and gently closed the door. "Sit here, my child." Mrs. Eleanor patted the bed beside her. Mariana sat, holding the elderly woman's fragile hand. "There's something I need to give you over there in the desk drawer. There's an envelope with your name on it." Mariana took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter in Mrs. Eleanor's shaky but legible script and some documents. "Read it after I'm gone. But I'll tell you now what's in there. I've left instructions in my will. You will receive a significant sum of money, enough to buy that little house in your town that you've always dreamed of, to ensure a comfortable life for you and your mother. I've also left you some of my favorite books and my mother's jewelry. Mrs. Eleanor, I can't accept—" "Yes, you can, and you will. It's not charity, Mariana, it's recognition. You gave me the happiest last few months I could have had. You gave me true friendship when I needed it most. You helped me protect my son. That is priceless, but this is my way of showing my gratitude. I didn't do any of it for money. I know, that's exactly why you deserve it. And there's one more thing in the letter, a piece of advice, about my son." "What advice?" Mrs. Eleanor smiled, the kind of smile she had when she knew more than she let on. "You'll understand when you read it, but I'll tell you one thing now. Edward is a good man. He's been hurt, deceived, but he has a generous heart. And he sees you, Mariana. He truly sees you. Not as an employee, but as a woman. Give it time. Let his wounds heal. Let life take its natural course. The best love stories are the ones that don't need to be forced, only discovered." Mariana didn't know what to say. She had noticed, yes, that something was changing between her and Edward. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. How he sought her company in the afternoons. How he smiled when she entered the room. But it seemed impossible. He was the boss. She was the employee. He lived in a palace. She came from a humble town. How could there be anything real between two such different worlds? Don't underestimate the power of the heart, my child. When it's true, it doesn't see social class. It doesn't see money or the lack of it. It only sees essence, and the two of you have essences that speak to each other. Mrs. Eleanor passed away on a November morning. It was peaceful in her sleep, surrounded by Edward and Mariana. She simply stopped breathing, as if she had decided it was time to rest. Edward held his mother's hand and cried silently, but there was also peace in those tears. She had fought bravely. She had protected the one she loved. She had departed with dignity. The funeral was simple, as she had requested. Few people, only the closest. Mariana stood by Edward's side throughout the ceremony, a silent but strong presence. When everyone had left and only the two of them remained in the cemetery, Edward finally spoke. "She loved you like a daughter, you know that, right? And I loved her like a mother. My own mother gave me life, but Mrs. Eleanor taught me that my life had value, that I was more than just my working hands. She wanted me to tell you something. She made me promise I would repeat her exact words." "What?" "She said, don't let pride, fear, or social conventions get in the way of what could be the truest thing in your life. Look with your heart, not with your eyes." Mariana felt the tears fall. Mrs. Eleanor, always wise, always seeing beyond the obvious. In the months that followed, Mariana and Edward navigated their grief together. She was no longer just an employee. They had dinner together, talked about everything and nothing, laughed at memories of Mrs. Eleanor. He took her to see his company, introduced her as a family friend. She helped him organize Mrs. Eleanor's things, donate clothes, decide what to keep and what to let go. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the space between them shrank. An accidental touch of hands here, a gaze that lingered. A second too long there. Conversations that stretched late into the night, shared laughter that illuminated the dark corners of their pain. It was on a January night, almost a year after Mrs. Eleanor's passing, that Edward finally gathered his courage. "Mariana, can I ask you a question?" "Of course. Have you ever thought about staying here? Not as an employee, as part of the family, as someone important to me." Mariana's heart raced. "Edward, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I've fallen in love with you. I don't know when it started. Maybe it was from the first day. I just couldn't see it because I was too blind. But I see it now. I see your strength, your kindness, your integrity. I see how you light up every room you enter, and I can't imagine my life without you in it." "Edward, I'm just a girl from the country. I'm just a man who needs you like he needs air. I don't care where you come from. I care about who you are." Mariana felt the tears roll down her cheeks. She thought of her mother, back in her small town, who had always told her that dignity was worth more than anything. She thought of Mrs. Eleanor, who had taught her that the heart sees what the eyes cannot. She thought of herself, the 18-year-old girl who left home with a cardboard suitcase and a simple dream, and the woman she had become. "I love you too, Edward. I'm afraid to love you because it seems impossible, but I do." He smiled, that smile that had been absent for so long. "Then let's make the impossible possible." Their relationship was built slowly, with patience and respect. Edward met Mariana's mother, traveled to the small town in Kentucky, and fell in love with the simplicity of the place, the honesty of the people, the taste of freshly brewed coffee. Celia looked at the rich man sitting at her humble table, eating biscuits she had made with her own hands, and saw not an important businessman, but a good man who loved her daughter. "Do you make my girl happy?" "I try to, every day, Mrs. Celia." "Then you have my blessing." 3 years after Mrs. Eleanor's passing, on a spring morning when New York was covered in yellow blossoms, Edward and Mariana were married, not in the mansion on the Upper East Side, but in a simple church in the town where Mariana was born. She wore a white dress made by her mother, simple but beautiful. Edward wore a suit but had skipped the tie, his sleeves rolled up, his feet almost on the earth. Celia cried with joy. The friends from the town filled the little church, and from above, Mariana knew, Mrs. Eleanor was smiling too. The life they built together was no fairy tale. They had challenges, arguments, difficult moments, but it had a solid foundation: truth, respect, and genuine love. They had 2 children, a girl and a boy, who grew up knowing both the mansion in New York and the small town in Kentucky, understanding that wealth is not in the size of the house, but in the size of the heart. Mariana never forgot where she came from. She used the inheritance money to renovate her mother's house, to help other young women from her town who dreamed of getting an education. She created a foundation in Mrs. Eleanor's name that offered scholarships to young people from humble backgrounds. Edward learned from Mariana the value of simple things. He learned that happiness cannot be bought but built. He learned that the most valuable people are those who love you for who you are, not for what you have. And on the nights when they sat on the porch of the mansion or on the porch of the little house in the town, Edward would hold Mariana's hand and silently thank Mrs. Eleanor for having seen what he could not see, for bringing this extraordinary woman into his life, for fighting until the end to protect him. "What are you thinking about?" Mariana would ask at those times. "That I'm the luckiest man in the world." "Lucky why?" "Because I almost lost everything, but in the end I gained you, and you're worth more than any fortune." Mariana would rest her head on his shoulder, the two of them looking at the stars, and think about how life takes strange turns. How a girl with a cardboard suitcase can end up building an empire of love. How the greatest riches don't fit in safes, but in open hearts. And she knew that Mrs. Eleanor, wherever she was, would agree. Because in the end, what matters isn't the size of the house you live in or the money you have in the bank. What matters is the dignity with which you live, the people you love, the integrity you maintain even when no one is watching. That is true wealth. That is what remains when all else passes. And that was the greatest lesson Mariana learned on her journey from a cardboard suitcase to a heart of gold. That it doesn't matter where you come from, as long as you know who you are. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Mariana, Edward, and Mrs. Eleanor has deeply touched your hearts. If you were moved by this journey of love, courage, and redemption, please leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories, and tell us in the comments which moment stood out to you the most. Which scene made you cry? What lesson will you take with you in life? Every day, we bring intense and true stories like this one that reveal the deepest and most beautiful side of the human soul, that show that true love always wins in the end and that dignity is worth more than any fortune. Your participation is very important to us and encourages us to continue bringing these moving narratives. Share this story with someone who needs to hear a message of hope today. Until the next episode, and may you always carry in your heart the values of Mariana: dignity, courage, and true love. A big hug, and see you soon.